for me, fulfillment is just being happy. You know, I never do anything that takes away the joy in me or doesn't fuel me. You know, if it doesn't fuel me, I even talk about certain doors, you know, when you walk into a door or an opportunity, and if you feel like you have to compromise yourself, who you are, and your happiness in the process, then it's not meant for you. You know, irrespective of how much money it's bringing or how much network or whatever, but if it's not fueling you, because at the end of the day, you can't pour from an empty cup. You know, you need to take care of yourself as well. It's only then when it hit me that, okay, I saw people who look nice, but I didn't see people who looked like me. You know, people who are addressing us, who are part of the C-suite or the executives, weren't black, female, and young. You know, and that's when it hit me that we don't have representation enough. And as much as we say we are growing, we're moving from, you know, I think the progress from 1994 to now, it has been an immense progress, but I still think we don't have enough representation in these spaces. And I thought to myself, if I'm going to say, okay, no, actually someone else is going to do it. If I'm not going to take the step and say it's up to me, then someone else is also going to look at me and say it's up to Tebogo, and I'm also looking at them, it's like it's up to them, and no action is being taken.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Leaders Podcast. I'm your host, Mphahlele, and our goal and mission with the show is to introduce you to stories of young people across the globe who we believe are the next generation of thought leaders in their respective fields. Right? This episode's guest is formerly known as the founder and executive director of Lead Young South Africa, an organization aimed at bridging the gap between young people living in townships and those living in suburbs across Southern Africa. Done by creating spaces that inspire, motivate, groom young people from the township of Davidton through mentorship. This young individual is currently enrolled at the University of Johannesburg, where she's studying towards her accounting degree with hopes of inspiring more young black women to go into the corporate accounting space. Think of the upcoming Gabriel Union or very next Sarah Jakes, or perhaps even Nonza Mombata. Think Tebogo Mphahlele. Tebogo, thank you so much for joining us here at the Leaders Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Mpho.
Thank you so much, Tebogo. You know, Tebogo, I've not really interacted with you, and then a lot of the time with such high impact individuals as yourself. I ask myself, what have you been doing since the lockdown, since being forced to be in quarantine? What have you been doing to keep yourself active or alive in such uncertain times?
I think if anything, you know, we're so busy doing so many things, you know, going out with our friends and, you know, making moves as today's generation would say. And I think what this lockdown has sort of forced us to do is to do some sort of like self-introspection, self-recuperation, where you're just sitting with yourself and going back to the starting board, you know, just drawing up your goals again, you know, just making sure that your goals are still in sight. And just, you know, bringing yourself back to yourself. And I think that's what this lockdown has sort of done to me. It has forced me to just look at some of my areas. Where do I need improvement? And also just taking time to myself. You know, we're so busy making moves that we don't have time to actually take care of ourselves. And I think that's what I've sort of done during this lockdown.
Quite commendable indeed. I think even when I think about it, I think rarely do we sit down and actually become aware of who we are becoming in the purpose of just making moves. You know, it becomes all about who's the big shot, you know. But I think what you said, that sense of stillness and looking within to reintroduce ourselves to ourselves. Now, Tebogo, I want us to start off with a trip down memory lane. You know, take me back to grade 11 St. Francis College in Benoni at the time, with the predicament of your community at the time. What was it that made you decide that you are going to be the change you wanted to see in your community?
So, as I said, coming from or having friends even who live in township areas, right? I think I was far more privileged in the sense that my parents could still afford to take me to a private school. unlike them, they had to obviously settle with the local township schools that were around. So then I thought to myself, look, I may not have the money, but at least I do have the resources. And at the time, I also knew a few people who could help out in whatever way. You know, sometimes as a young person, you don't necessarily even just need money to pursue your dream, but you need someone to come and motivate you. And I felt like I had that motivation because I would go to a lot of seminars in your center or wherever, where you have young people come talk to you, you know, individuals like Candice Muteselle, and you leave there so inspired and so motivated to go after your dream, and that drive is there. You know, I thought to myself, I mean, if I have the privilege of getting this drive, you know, why don't I afford someone else, my peer, the same opportunity, who unfortunately doesn't come from the same, you know, background as me.
And in looking at your trajectory, Tebogo, we both know the impact of the GIBS program that it had on your growth, and it specifically in the formation of your organization. I want to understand, you know, what impact did this program have on your formation of the foundation, but also more so, how did you find out about it?
So the GIBS program is, well, it's called the Spirit of Youth program, hosted by GIBS, which is the Gordon Institute of Business Science, which also happens to be UP's business school. So every year, they what they do is that they go to different schools around Gauteng, and then they choose the top 3 grade 11s in those different schools.
Wow.
So I was fortunate enough that, I was quite an academic. I believe I still am. So I was fortunate enough to be part of the top 3 individuals who are part of the program. So what happens is that you go there every the first month of the first Saturday of every month. So you go there, you meet up with people who are the same age, if not a year older or a year younger, and then you are put into groups, and that's your group for the whole year. But then you also get to meet up with other groups, and you have all these discussions on how to make South Africa a better South Africa with having conversations amongst youth. And not just having conversations with people who are older, because I mean, as we look at the statistics and the demographics of our country, youth make up a lot of, you know, SA's population. It's only mandatory that we have conversations amongst ourselves that will, you know, build the South Africa that we want. So I think that's what that platform has afforded me, to see or be in spaces with people who are the same age as me, and even better, it's people who are from different backgrounds, because we also have people who come from Orange Farm, just different schools, and that should have showed you, you know, the fact that they come from underprivileged background does not necessarily mean that they don't have dreams, or that they don't have a say in what's happening in South Africa. If anything, I was motivated and inspired by them as well, that even irrespective of where they come from, they still have the drive they have, and that for me was inspiring. And the other thing, I remember there was a session we were having, and one guy, he was 16 at the time, because most of us are 16, and he's like, so we were talking about what is it that you're doing, you know, tell us about yourself. And he was like, so my father has helped me to start my own pilot school. So he has a whole aviation school at the age of 16. And I said, and I think that's the moment that really made me think, and like, I was like, okay, I have all these resources. What am I doing? You know, am I still looking at my age and saying I'm only 16, and therefore, I mean, what else can I do? And that sort of made me have that shift of, actually, girl, you know, whatever resources that you have right now, you have to do something. You have to start something. And I think that program really just opened up my eyes, and we were just exposed to a lot of people from different races, backgrounds, and that does something to the way you see life and the way you see your position in life as well.
Yeah, which I think touches on the importance, you know, of the company you keep. You know, in that space, you were in the space of young people, and in there was some sources of inspiration that kind of compelled you to start taking this step. I'm genuinely interested, when this idea came to mind, what was the very first step you took, and who did you speak to? Like, I'm just let's say the morning came up. What was the very first thing you started to do?
So when the idea came, so I was at the program. So then later on, when I came back home, my older brother was home. And then I talked to him about a lot of things. And then there was this one, when something is in your head and you want to implement it, you might not know where you want to start, but it makes you excited. That's how excited I was. And I couldn't stop talking about it, and to myself, that is. And then I was like, okay, let me just share it with my brother. And when I shared it to him, no, actually I got home, I took a bath, and during that bathing process, it was just in my head the whole time.
Yeah.
And then afterwards, I was like, okay, let me go tell my brother. He's much older than me. And he was so amazed, that at 16 you're just thinking about this huge idea. And he was like, go for it, Far too often we look at our skin color, as I said, and also sometimes our gender. Sometimes it's one thing being young, but also just being black and female at the same time. That's also just a big thing. And he was like, go for it. If it doesn't work out, it's okay. But just have that possibility. There's also that possibility of it working out. What then? And that's when I was like, okay, I am going for it. And I never stopped. I never looked back ever since.
Wow. And your organization in specific has got this kind of this myopic focus on bridging the gap between young people in townships and those living in suburbs. Talk to me about the challenges that ever since you started this organization that you have faced throughout the evolution of the organization and trying to bring this mission to fruition.
I think the one main one, because sometimes in terms of you may have, because I think the one thing that I always had to do was try and look at things that I have around me and utilize whatever resources I had at the time. But then there came a time where I think funding was also something that I needed in order for me to really just implement my vision fully. And I think going back to what I was saying, being black, young, and female, and then going to a sponsor and saying, I'm the 16-year-old who has this vision, and your vision is quite clear, and your steps in terms of how you want to implement your vision is quite clear. But for the fact that you are young and they just look at you like, okay, you are not serious, or I believe in your vision, but I don't think I believe in you enough to give you the funding. So I think that was my biggest challenge at the time, because I ended up having to use my allowance, any money that I was getting from my parents. I ended up just using it. Also with the registration process of it, I also just had to utilize what I had at the time to implement it. And I think the other one, sometimes I think also the other problem is that you are young, and when you're going to these different schools and stuff, it's quite difficult to in as much as it's inspiring for them to hear from a person who's their age, sometimes to some people it might seem like, what does she know, and things like that. And I think and I suppose that's why I sort of had to make sure that when I go there, I go with the individuals who are young as well, but also people who would, I suppose, be respected far more, if that makes sense. So that has been, I think those two have been my sort of biggest challenges along the way.
And did being a young black woman a thing that also played to your disadvantage in any way?
I think so. I think that's the problem with society, that we are programmed. The moment you see a black young female, you're programmed to think, oh, she's successful. Who does she sleep with, or how, or where did she steal the money? We're not programmed to think that she actually worked hard to get to where she is at the moment. And I think that's our biggest problem. And it's not even about white people thinking about that way, looking at us and thinking about that, having that particular thinking, but it's also just amongst us as black people. They look at you and they think, who does she think she is? Just because she is, I don't know, has a seat at the table, they automatically think you didn't earn your way to that particular seat. And I think that's the sort of mindset we need to change. And the only way we'll change that if we start extending the table and making sure that more people who look like us are also in those rooms that we want to see ourselves in.
What I love about your response is that you kind of highlight on how you cannot, in a sense, control what people say or people's perspective or their rhetoric. But at the end of the day, the results don't lie. You know, if Tebogo Mphahlele is Tebogo Mphahlele, if she's doing the most, you can ignore her for some
True.
time, but eventually you've got to pay
But
attention. Which I kind of love.
true.
Talking about the foundation, what are some of the projects that you've managed to successfully execute ever since you've started?
Okay. So I think the one main one was obviously bringing in people who are young and in different fields, be the entertainment industry, entrepreneurs, and all that. So I've been lucky enough to partner up with a lot of those individuals. So we'd go to township schools and have these talks, and also, you know, when they say networking is very important, you know, in terms of teaching, or rather giving the individuals, the pupils, different information they can't necessarily get from the internet. And what more than hearing it from someone they can relate to, someone who's young. So I think that's one of the main ones that I've been doing. And then the other one has been the donation and collection of textbooks, because I realized that I still had my grade 3 textbooks lying around at home, and my friends had the same. You know, so I literally just went around collecting textbooks and reading books. And I think in the first month of me starting my foundation, I had collected over 500 books, and that has been a thing for me. I think books and reading books, study guides, and as well as textbooks, and just donating them to various schools that don't have these books. And I've also partnered up with a book club in Davidson. That's where I also just send through some of the reading books too. And then people are in the surrounding area then go there to access the books as well. So those are the main two. And then right now, unfortunately, because of the pandemic, I had to sort of find ways or other ways in which I can still implement this idea. So I'm really big on, I think it also goes back to what I'm studying. I'm really big on things like financial literacy. You know, in South Africa, we don't want to talk about this thing called money. And I think for me, I didn't really grow up in the household where we spoke about money, but because of the career field that I wanted to see myself in, I always read about money and you know, my financial management and things like that. I also have a spreadsheet which I use every month for my budget and stuff like that. So I think it's very important that I'm looking into partnering up with other bank institutions so that I can fully and properly implement this thing, where I start a financial literacy program catered for people in primary and those in high school. Obviously the syllabus will be a bit different for different ages, but then just with the whole idea of, you know, by the time they at least get to matric and going to varsity, they have an idea on how to manage money. And you know, it's shocking how there's some people who are in their 20s and they're ready to buy a car, but they are shocked that there's a thing called things like your balloon payment. You know, when you buy a car, the only thing that they ever highlight is that your monthly payments are this, and not telling, even though your monthly payments may look as low as 3,000 Rand a month, but they don't tell you that there's a balloon payment where you'll be paying, you know, probably 10% of the total of the car, you know, that you might have to pay in one go. And that's something that we're not taught about, because we don't grow up, you know, discussing or having these regular conversations.
I think quite commendable indeed. I mean, I find myself actually, I'm 21 years old, thinking about, I think I need to actually take some personal finances classes. You know, in high school, in our education systems, they don't really teach us much of these things about finances. I don't even know how to pay taxes. And I think it's quite commendable. And I think money is a very important thing that the more we become comfortable of. Because I think growing up, when I look at it, my relationship with money was one filled with fear. I would be scared to ask for money. I'd be scared to when I do something for someone and they want to pay me, I'd be like, no, it's fine. And I think, as you said, that stems from the fact that we do not discuss it. We are not in constant.
And it has a ripple effect on other things as well. Because I think if you look at businesses owned by young Black people, you know, one of the big reasons why they don't succeed is because financial management. You know, the moment they get that funding, it's like, it seems like it's a huge amount of money, but it's not. You know, and then they misuse the money, and then that also just has an impact on their business as well, as the success they offer their business as well.
Mm. Now, Tebogo, just to personalize it a bit, having listened to some of your interviews, you speak about your shift from wanting to become a doctor to wanting to become a CA, in which you delved into that was a step that brought fulfillment to you. I was quite interested in what fulfillment, because I found it so profound. That what does fulfillment mean to you, and how did that shift actually bring that fulfillment to life?
So I think, so as I said, growing up, I was quite an academic. I still believe I am. So I was one of those nerds. And I think that's the problem with being an academic or being so good at studying, that you pass all your subjects, right? So you're doing so well in all these subjects and you're not really sure which one speaks to you. And I think I sort of had to make that. I think that's why I was saying, I think also growing up in households where, being a doctor is that one thing that, you need to be a doctor, because doctors, if you're an academic, then you have to be a doctor. And I think that's the idea that was planted in me for the longest time. And that's why I think right up until my grade 11, I was like, I want to become a doctor, I want to become a doctor. And then I got to a point, because I wasn't even doing accounting in high school. I got to a point where I was like, okay, I'm passing physics, I'm passing all these science subjects, but I don't like it. I don't like what I'm doing. Goes back to your fulfillment question. For me, fulfillment is just being happy. I never do anything that takes away the joy in me or doesn't fuel me. If it doesn't fuel me, I even talk about certain doors, when you walk into a door or an opportunity, and if you feel like you have to compromise yourself, who you are, and your happiness in the process, then it's not meant for you. Irrespective of how much money it's bringing or how much network or whatever, but if it's not fueling you, because at the end of the day, you can't pour from an empty cup. You need to take care of yourself as well. So I think at that point in time, I was like, I'm passing the subject, but I don't see myself doing engineering or medicine. And lucky enough, during my grade 12, I had the privilege of going to, so there's this thing called VAC work, where you, during the June holidays or during your December holidays, you can go to any accounting firm. I know the biggest at the time, one of the big 4 accounting firms had a VAC work program that you can be a part of. So I enrolled and I was accepted. I was there for a day. So you get there, you're so excited because, you've never been in this atmosphere where you're in corporate and you're seeing all these people in their nice suits and their heels. And funny enough, when I got there, that's all I saw. I was inspired by, these people looking good and looking like they know what they're doing. And it's when I got back home and my parents asked me, so how was your day? And I was, I was still explaining, it was so good. I saw people in people who look nice and stuff like that. It's only then when it hit me that, okay, I saw people who look nice, but I didn't see people who looked like me. People who were addressing us, who were part of the C-suite or the executives, weren't Black, female, and young. And that's when it hit me that we don't have representation enough. And as much as we're saying we are growing, we're moving from, I think the progress from 1994 to now, it has been an immense progress, but I still think we don't have enough representation in these spaces. And I thought to myself, if I'm going to say, okay, no, actually someone else is going to do it. If I'm not going to take the step and say it's up to me, then someone else is also going to look at me and say it's up to Tebogo, and I'm also looking at them. It's like it's up to them, and no action is being taken. So I thought to myself, actually, I don't like this science thing. I'm passing it, but I don't like it. I'm like, I'm going to take this. I'm also a prayerful person. I also just prayed about it first. So I was like, I'm going to take this decision of going into the corporate space. And at the end, and the big thing is that I'm not only doing it for myself, but I'm also making sure that I'm doing it for people who are coming after me, to see that it is possible to see women or people who look like them in C-suits making executive decisions in all these big accounting and audit firms. And that's how I sort of made my decision. And I think it got validated or it got more firmer when I was doing my first year. I went to a lot of sort of networking sessions with a lot of CAs and stuff. And I think I remember I went to SAICA, the South African Institute of Chartered Accountants,
Yeah.
has this thing called top 35 under 35. So it's CAs who are under the age of 35 who basically nominate themselves or get nominated for that award of the year. And then during that night, it was like the awards evening, and I was also just there as part of the audience. And the winner that day was Mpho. Her name was Mpho. I forgot her surname though. She was I think 34th, if I'm not mistaken. She is a CA, qualified CA. She's in the public sector. She also has her own foundation and organization going on. She's just a powerhouse. And me seeing her win that night, I think I was like, something in me was, when you feel home, you don't know what home feels like, but that felt like home. And I was like, I want to see myself on that stage one day. And, her being a Black female just showed it that it's possible, and we are slowly getting to this point where we're not only asking for a seat at the table, but also we are extending the table to fellow, Black females as well. And that's how I sort of, became far more firm in my decision of taking the CA route and being in corporate.
And outside of the titles or the CEO of Lead Young, who is Tebogo? What do you do to relax and keep yourself alive?
I think I should have started the interview with this. I think first and foremost, before anything, I am a child of God. I'm a woman after God's heart. And if anyone knows me, even via my social media platforms, I always just talk about God. I think he plays a huge role in my life. So if I'm not doing anything, I'll probably be listening to gospel music, watching a sermon or something of that sort. And that's where I draw a lot of my fuel from. And that's where I make sure that I keep motivated and inspired, because, God is the source. It's the same way with my phone. When your phone is low, what do? Immediately, the first instinct is to go and plug it onto your charger for it to start working again. Same thing with me. I just always go back to my source, the person who gives me that energy and stuff. And I think, that's who Tebogo is. And besides that, I think I love reading. I read a lot. So any not novels. I'm more of a, so I don't like fiction. I am more of a realistic, give me a book on economics and something practical. So I am that sort of reader. I also just love spending time with my family and friends and just chilling, man. But that's just Tebogo. Besides, other than all the titles, and I'm a daughter to my parents. I'm the only girl at home, but I have 2 other siblings. And I just have this beautiful heart. And besides that, I also just if there's one thing I always do, because I get a lot of DMs from people on social media platforms on how to navigate around this life thing. I think if there's one thing that I've really committed myself to is, actually sending voice notes if I can, just helping people out and really just responding the best way I can, and also networking, or rather connecting them with the right people who are in whatever profession that they want to tap into. Because I would have liked someone to do that for me, but luckily I had already had that drive to go out there and ponder and look for all these information. It's always good to just be that helping hand, and that also just makes me happy. It really does make me happy.
And I guess having God as the foundation of it all, it's kind of something that helps really to anchor you. That even when there's hype around Tebogo and all these achievements, your foundation and how deep you're, which I think is quite important. I think I've seen a lot of young people lose who they are in fame, or running after fame. And I think, at the point in which you're at your peak, turning back and bowing down your knees and praying or praising him, kind of really helps you anchor yourself and just really don't buy the hype.
That's very true. That is very true.
Quite profound. Talking about books, actually, what's your favorite book?
That is the toughest question, hey? I have a lot of favorite books. But let me say, I was currently reading a book called Lean In by the CFO of Facebook. Yes. So funny enough, I've always wanted this book ever since I was in grade 11, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
And I don't know, something would come up. Every time I have to buy it, something would come up and I wouldn't get the book. It's finally this year where I saw it on Take a Lot of like, okay, now I'm actually getting this book. And I'm so glad that I didn't read it when I was in grade 11, that I only got to read it now, because obviously I've grown so much.
Yeah.
And whatever that is written in that book makes far more sense for me now than it would have. And it's impacting me far more than it would have years ago. So I highly recommend this book, especially to a lot of young females who are aspiring, or young professionals, or people who are just wanting to make moves, as we always say as females, and really just talk so much about how, as society, we always just think of women as people who, one day just need to get married, be in a family, and we don't talk so much about, and we're always saying women, as a woman, you need to get married to the successful man who is the CEO of the big investment company. And what we're not saying, or conversations that we're not saying, is you can be the CEO of that investment company. We're not having those power shift conversations, and I think those are a very important conversation, not even having them with people, but having them with yourself, and sort of unlearning everything that you thought you had to be, and being what you're meant to be.
One of the key principles that I kind of got to understand as the underlying principle while looking into you is this element of being a go-getter, which I kind of was and even when I was listening to your answers, attending awards ceremony, putting yourself in spaces where you've got these amazing individuals that really help you make a better person. Talking about inspiration, who inspires you the most, and what about that person actually inspires you to be a better person?
I think without a doubt, my mother plays a huge role in my life. She's been in corporate for more than 25 years, and believe it or not, working for the same company. She started off as a receptionist and worked her way up into management level. And if that's not inspiration, and also just being someone who you see every day, I think she has really played a huge role in my life. And with that said, I always say that I draw inspiration from a lot of people. Because the moment you just draw inspiration, or the moment you just look up to one person, you end up just wanting to copy their lives. I see a lot of people who are aspiring presenters, and they look up to Bonang. They end up sounding like her. I always say that no one is perfect. So it's always important for you to take out the different aspects from different people that you'd want to implement in your life. And also just understand that they're also human. And hence just take away those little aspects from different people that you'd like to implement in your life, and that's how I sort of build myself. So I take away different things that Bonang's work ethic, and then I also look at other different people who are in corporate and what are they doing, so that I can also just build myself and the person that I'd like to be.
Quite commendable indeed. On that note,
so
what would you say is your message to the world?
Sure. I have a lot to say. But I think, there's this one quote that it's on my wall. Every wall that I go to, be it when I'm at school or at home, I always just write this quote down. It says that our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate, but our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. We often ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, successful, talented? But the question should be, who are you not to be? Playing small, your playing small does not serve the world. You have so much potential, and the greatest thing is that you are you, and that is your greatest superpower, and no one can do you more than you can do you. And whatever that you have, the world is ready for that. And your dreams are valid. As Zozibini said, that we need to start cementing ourselves and and stop this thing of when we get into certain rooms, we downplay ourselves. You deserve to be in those rooms. It says, God always says that he doesn't call the qualified, but he qualifies the called. If you are in that room, you deserve to be there. And work hard so that you stay in that room. The last thing we want is to have more Black people fall off because once they get to a space, they get too comfortable. You still need to work hard and ensure that you stay in those different spaces and that you grow also as an individual. Yeah.
And how can our listeners and our viewers stay in touch with the work you're doing?
I am available on, I wanted to say all social media platforms. I'm not on Facebook.
Yeah.
So I think I'm available on Twitter, on Instagram, LinkedIn as well. And on LinkedIn, I am Tebogo Mphahlele. On Instagram, it's Tebogo.Mphahlele. And then on Twitter, it's Tebo_Mphahlele. And yeah, I always try and respond to my DMs, appropriate DMs though. Anything career related. If you want me to hook you up with anyone who's in your field, if I know anyone, I always make the initiative to actually try and help out. And if you can also just send me an email. It's tebogo@gmail.com. And also you can also just follow my foundation's social media platforms. At the moment, I'm the one running the social media platform, so I'd always see any messages or emails that you might send through to us. It's at Lijang SA on all social media platforms.
Okay. Right. Yeah. Thank you so much, Tebogo. I think really when thinking about you, I loved how you answered the question of what's your message to the world. Really got me thinking is that sometimes I even think about, when I look at all these young individuals, specifically in Forbes 30 under 30, start to realize that a lot of what they're doing is not anything anybody couldn't do. You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
That we all have that fire within us. And I'm glad that you shared that. And I really hope that when we release those episodes, that all the young girls who are watching this episode draw inspiration, and that your DMs get filled again. And really hope that they are inspired. And I think what you said in your message today was something that's quite relevant right now. I think a lot of young people thinking that we're in lockdown and think about how do I bulletproof myself, throughout the space or during such uncertain times, navigating these waters. So thank you so much, Tebogo.
Thank you so much for having me. It was such an honor and pleasure to be on this platform. I like what you're doing as well. I think all these interviews that you're having, someone who watches this, I think those very few vessels that will be changed by these interviews, I think you're just doing an amazing thing. And thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much, Tebogo. All right, guys, there you have it from Tebogo herself. Guys, go read and check about her on our social media pages. We'll be sharing all this information on our Leaders Podcast Instagram. Once again, here at the Leaders Podcast, we believe that as more and more young people grow conscious of their unique purpose, as they discover their hidden pearl, they essentially add value to society in the only way they can. Please remember to follow us on our YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, Spotify, and Apple Podcast at the Leaders Podcast. And if you enjoyed this episode, please do not slide into Tebogo's DM, but please like, comment, and share with at least 3 people who you believe will find this episode quite valuable. I'm your host once again, Mphahlele. Thank you.